Hi all, it's Palest Blue, but you guys can call me Harry, and today we got a defense of the M14 in Black Ops. Some of you might be subscribed to XJaws, but he's quite a famous commentator at the moment, and he recently posted a video in which he argued that the M14 is the worst assault rifle in the game. As it happens though, I've recently been using the M14, and in the process I picked up some slightly different feelings about the weapon to what he got. I won't claim that it was among the best assault rifles. I mean, it certainly doesn't fall into that class of weapon that can really do justice to a player's potential. They're not weapons such as, the ACR and FAMAS from Modern Warfare 2 and the M14 and MP5 in COD 4 that really do what you ask of them. But then again, I suppose that no weapons in Black Ops are completely obedient, even the best of them, such as the FAMAS. The M14 has its problems. The biggest is the combination, really, of the semi-automatic fire and the impeding recoil. The G3 in COD 4 before the fire rate patch was actually a deadly weapon. Even though it was semi-automatic, because you could fire as fast as your trigger finger would allow, with almost no recoil, it actually became a decent weapon. So a semi-automatic fire is not in itself the problem, but it would initially seem an unjustifiable nerf by Treyarch to couple this with high recoil and also a fire rate cap, both of which the M14 possesses. So I understand Jaws' argument, but I think it's worth looking at the numbers a bit more closely before coming to a conclusion about the M14. The key contention when deciding which is the worst assault rifle exists really between the M14 and the FAL. XJaws placed the FAL above the M14, and he argued that it has less recoil. While this may be true visually, why it may look like that's the case, it's probably worth looking at the numbers in a bit more depth, and because they might suggest that there's more to it than just what seems to be the case. So the way recoil works on Black Ops, and indeed many other COD games, is that the guns are given 5 numbers that assign how they behave when they're fired. 4 of these numbers give the direction of the recoil, and the other, which is known as center speed, indicates how quickly the recoil will settle, sort of counteracts the recoil. So let's look at the first 4 numbers to begin with, those numbers that determine the direction and magnitude of the recoil. For most guns it's true that sort of 1 number designates the amount of upward recoil, 1 the amount of downward recoil, 1 the amount of recoil to the left, and 1 the amount of recoil to the right. For some weapons this isn't quite true, but it is true for the case of the M14 and the FAL, so let's not worry about the anomalies kind of in this regard. The higher the numbers are, the greater the recoil can potentially go in that direction. So if weapon A has 100 in the upward direction and B has 10 in the upward direction, then A has the ability to recoil more in that direction. The thing to remember though is that these numbers work on kind of a continuous scale, by which I mean, and this is a bit of a sort of a simplification, weapon A's upward recoil can be any number between 0 and 100, and B's upward recoil can be any number between 0 and 10. The game randomly generates a value between those limits. So while A will generally have higher recoil, anywhere up to 100, B can, for any one shot, actually have more. So, for example, say that both guns are fired, and the game sort of then generates 2 random numbers, one for A and one for B. So the one for A will be between 0 and 100, and the one for B will be between 0 and 10. So it could, in theory, generate 5 for A and 9 for B, in which case A would recoil less because B's got a high number, it's got 9, and A has 5. So you need to bear in mind though that there are 4 of these numbers, not just the one, as I used in that simplification there. So the game will be generating several values for each shot, and just by the by, from a technical standpoint, it's not exactly clear at the moment exactly how the game does it, whether it rolls 1 number for each axis or 1 number for each direction. They would have slightly different implications for the recoil. Having 1 number in each direction would lead to a more balanced pattern in most weapons. But either way, the most important thing for you to understand right now for the purposes of this argument is that recoil is not 1 value, but 5 values, 4 that throw it off, and 1 which is the center speed that pushes it back, and that the game generates numbers randomly between 2 limits to determine the magnitude and direction of that recoil. So already we can see that judging a weapon's recoil is not as simple as just saying that one gun has more recoil than another. So let's return to specifics. The FAL's recoil is 70 upwards, 70 to the left, 50 to the right, and 20 down, and its center speed is 1400. So what can we tell from this? Well, the FAL's recoil has a bias in the upward and leftward directions. But the thing is, the numbers are sort of uneven enough that it's hard to predict exactly how fast to tap the trigger. You don't really know where the weapon's going each time. So that makes it hard to get a steady rhythm going with the FAL, simply because it has some bias, but the bias isn't huge, and as I say, that remains hardly predictable, so quite unpredictable. And as counterintuitive as it sounds, bias recoil is good simply because it's predictable, but because with the FAL you can either head left or right, and quite a long way left or right, as 70 and 50 are large recoil values. It's hard to know exactly where your weapon is going to go after that one shot. The M14 is different though. It has the same center speed of 1400, but its upward recoil is 80, its leftward is 40, rightward is 40, and downward is 40. So it can recoil more. It can go 80 upwards, which is a huge lift, but the recoil is heavily biased in that direction, so it will almost always lift. It can go left or right, but not by much, only 40 points each. And the maximum horizontal deviation is equal in both directions, which helps in this case. With the M14 you kind of know where you are, but you almost always have high upward recoil because but this is pretty much all you have to worry about and compensate for. So the numbers indicate that the M14, while having the potential to recoil more on some occasions, is actually much more manageable. You can kind of keep a steadier beat with your trigger finger with the M14, which is all important when you need to make your shots count. So maybe it's difference in recoil animation that is to blame for the perception that the M14 has much more recoil than the FAL. For example, the Commando and AK-47 have identical recoil stats, but they look as though they behave quite differently. This is just because the animation that Treyarch give to the AK-47 suggests kind of dominant upward recoil, when really the AK-47's recoil values are 60 up, 60 left, 60 right and 30 down, so much more balanced than it would initially seem just from the visual perspective. So perhaps the animation for the M14 offers the illusion that it always has more recoil than the FAL, but as I've demonstrated, this is not necessarily true. The last thing I would dispute about Jaw's argument is that kind of in his video he claims that the M14 and FAL kill in, and I quote, 3 to 4 bullets. Really at the end of the day this is just straight up misinformation. They actually will kill in 2 bullets up to medium long range, after which they kind of turn to 3 bullet kills. This is advantageous, and while it doesn't completely make up for the semi-automatic feature, I believe it does make them usable weapons. That's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot for listening, and see you later. Our spy planes in the air. Your work is appreciated. Well